was never God's original plan, but that's why Jesus came. We are never alone. We are never abandoned.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his conversation with Sheila Walsh next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated. If that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mothers.
I think God calls all of us to fill different roles at different times, and I think that he wanted Donald Trump to become president, and that's why he's there. And I think he has done a tremendous job in supporting a lot of the things that people of faith really care about.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast, Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
And glad to have you in the conversation today as we move forward. Got a lot to talk about today, so we'll try to get into it as soon as we can.
Rob and I were talking before the show, and we came up, the Big Brain Mammals have decided that as a Focal Point team, we're going to declare this National Fossil Fuel Appreciation Week. And stay warm, everybody, because it's cold out there.
I bet everybody is really happy that they got gas
some
and
fossil fuels.
Got some fossil fuels. You know, I grew up in a little town in Colorado up in the Rockies called Buena Vista. We could tell outsiders, because they'd call it Buena Vista. They'd use the actually correct pronunciation. But those of us that lived there, the natives, we called it Buena Vista. And no, it was in Craig, Colorado, up in the northwestern part of the state. I delivered papers for the Denver Post. I had a route in Craig, Colorado. And one winter night, it got down to 58 degrees below zero in Craig, Colorado. I still remember that. And one Christmas morning, I had to deliver my paper route in 33-degree below temperatures on Christmas Day. Now, my dad, the good guy that he was, he helped me, took half of my route for me, and we got it done before. Yeah, but you get come home, you got little icicles hanging down from your, from your eyebrows and stuff like that. All right, so we hope everybody does stay warm out there. I guess they're having these things called frost quakes. That's when there's moisture in the ground and it freezes, and water expands when it freezes, and so it will create these kind of subterranean seismic activity. So you'll hear the crack, really makes a noise, and the ground kind of rumbles and shakes.
I saw a video of it, sort of
the frost quakes, frost heaves and stuff. And
I saw one report. The headline said they cautioned experts cautioned people from breathing outside. And then you read into it a little more. They're talking about just cover your mouth.
Yeah,
and things,
just don't breathe and you'll be fine.
The headline got my attention.
You can go outside, just don't breathe.
Just don't breathe. Stay out there as long as you want, as long as you don't breathe. So anyway, got all that going on out there. Apparently it's too cold. This will make a lot of people unhappy out there in the Midwest. Too cold to deliver beer because the beer freezes. So they can't even deliver that. All kinds of other deliveries have been impacted because of the cold weather. All right. Well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. Our schedule at pray.afa.net has taken us to Nehemiah chapter 4. And this is a story about the opposition that builds against Nehemiah and his group of volunteers that are rebuilding the walls of the city. Remember, Nehemiah was living in Iran when the story starts, in Persia. He got feedback, eyewitness information from family members that had been to Jerusalem and come back, that the gates of the city were burned with fire and the walls were broken down. Now, if the walls are broken down and the gates are burned with fire, that's a community of people. That's a city that has absolutely no defense against marauders, against brigands, against invading armies. And so this distressed Nehemiah, you remember. He wept and fasted and mourned for days. And he prayed prayers of repentance. Remember, he used the word we. We have sinned. We have acted wickedly in your eyes. He identified with the people and vicariously repented on their behalf because he was deeply disturbed about what was happening. So in answer to his prayer, God gave him authority, commissioned from the king of Persia, to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls of the city and the gates, which is a big, giant civil engineering project. We talked about this yesterday. The last thing you'd think of that would be a matter of spirituality or a matter of importance to God would be a civil engineering construction project. But we see that the building of this wall was central to the purposes that God had for the city of Jerusalem. So he was behind it. He commissioned Nehemiah as a wall builder to go all the way from Persia, all the way from Iran to Jerusalem in order to carry out this construction project of rebuilding the wall around the city. So who's to say that God hasn't raised up Donald Trump in our day for the same purpose? Maybe God has raised up Donald Trump to build a wall in our day because walls are just as necessary in our day for protection as they were in the days of Nehemiah. Now, anyway, the opposition becomes intense. It becomes severe, and this is one of the lessons from the book of Nehemiah. If we set out to do something for God, we are going to run into a buzzsaw of opposition. We're going to run into intense, vitriolic, and vocal opposition. And this is what happened to Nehemiah. Sanballat was one of the guys. He was angry, he was greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews and called them names, insulted them. Same thing we see today when conservatives step out, confront evil in our land. They get demonized. They are mocked. They are ridiculed incessantly. And it's fueled by this rage. I mean, they tell us that we're the haters. We're the ones that are enraged. The hate is coming from the left. They're the ones that are the genuine haters. We don't hate anybody. I don't hate a living soul on planet Earth. But we love homosexuals enough to tell them the truth about where homosexuality, what it leads to, and where it will take you. So anyway, this happens to Nehemiah. They were laughing at him. One of the opponents was saying, look, a fox, if you've ever seen a fox up close, they're really light animals. They don't weigh very much. You think a fox is kind of like wolves, but they're small. They even call the little ones, I guess they call them kits, right? Kittens, kit foxes. So they're pretty light. And they were laughing at the Jews. If a fox went up on that wall they're trying to build to protect the city, that wall would completely fall down. Those guys have no idea what they're doing. Like a cat got up there, the whole thing would crumble. And so what happened is the wall was joined together, despite all this, to half its height. And then Nehemiah hit not a midlife crisis, but a mid-wall crisis. So the opposition had been intense from the beginning, finally got to the point where the enemies of what God was doing had stopped the work altogether. It had come to a dead stop at mid-wall. So Nehemiah was determined to rally the troops, get them back to work, even though they had people who were plotting against them to fight against Jerusalem and cause confusion in it before they could get the wall built. And so here's what they did in verse 9. The Bible says that we prayed to our God. That was number one. We prayed to our God. So that's always the response of God's people when we're pursuing what we believe and what we may even know is the will of God, and we run into this just buzzsaw of opposition, buzzsaw of pushback, buzzsaw of resistance, and the work is stopped. What do? Well, you pray to the God of heaven. Now, the second thing that they did is they set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Notice this. Now, this is I just love this. We prayed to our God and we set a guard. It wasn't one or the other. It was both and. We prayed to our God and we set a guard. And in fact, we find out later in the chapter that all the workers that were out there had a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. Each one labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. So these were God's workmen, and they were packing heat. All of them was carrying. They were all carrying as they worked on the project, so that in an instant's notice they could drop the trowel and they could grab their weapons and go into battle to defend themselves and their fellow countrymen and the city of Jerusalem. So it's not one or the other. It's not either or. You know, I remember some guy coming through our neighborhood one time, and he was selling security alarm systems for homes in the neighborhood. And he was making his pitch, and one of the guys in our neighborhood said, you know, we've already got a security system. And he said, oh, yeah, what's that? And the guy said, well, God and a loaded gun. So it was God and a loaded gun, not one or the other. So God expects us to use common sense. He expects us to use things that we can gather around us for our protection, to use our brains, and to use the resources that He's put around us that are available to us. We're not to dispense with all of that, but to use that and then trust God through that to protect us. You know, it's kind of like taking medication. I started a new prescription drug, as many of you know, to fight the cancer that's trying to make a comeback in my body. And you know what I pray almost every time I take the pills? I pray, God, would you work with these pills? Would you work with this drug to make it effective in stopping my cancer? So I'm using the weapons that modern science has provided, but I'm not ignoring God. I'm not leaving God out of the equation. I'm not depending on the medication. I'm depending on God to use the medication to do His work in my life. Well, let's take some of these concepts and themes from Nehemiah 4 to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord God Almighty, I pray that you will move among us as you moved among your people in Nehemiah's time, that we too may care deeply about our city and our nation, and go to work to repair and rebuild our culture according to your will. Help us to turn the heart of our people back to you. I pray that by your Spirit you will prompt us to work with all of our heart, that the work may go ahead and the gaps in our protection be closed. As your people seek to rebuild, Lord, we know that there will be those who become angry and incensed at our efforts and will ridicule us. They will accuse us of being feeble and insignificant and will plot together to fight against us and stir up trouble against us. I pray that you will hear our prayers when we are despised and insults are thrown in our faces. I pray that you will turn the insults of our enemies on their own heads. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight. Show us how to pray in those times and how to respond in practical ways to meet their threats. Please frustrate all their plans. Grant us renewed energy when our strength begins to give out, and give us perseverance in the face of discouragement, especially when it comes from friends. I pray that we will not be afraid, but remember that you are a great and awesome God. May we fight for our brothers, our sons, our daughters, our wives, and our homes. In the name of Jesus, we ask you to fight for us. Amen. You know, and one of the things about this that really grabbed me is when Nehemiah is seeking to motivate these guys to go to work. He says this, do not be afraid of them, the enemies of the truth. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. And listen to this. Fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So if you can't find a reason to fight, get involved in the culture war, get engaged for your sons and for your daughters.
The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. In the wake of the Talking Snake media's absolutely false reporting concerning the Covington High School students, Whoopi Goldberg, co-host of The View, asked the panel why they thought the media continues to falsely report stories. In a moment of candor, Joy Behar responded, "It's because we're desperate to get Trump out of office." Behar included herself among the media hordes who are seething to see President Trump removed from office. Their emotional investment in overturning the will of over 60 million Americans drives them to lie, smear, and slander. At least, joyless Behar admitted it.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. California Senator Kamala Harris has announced her candidacy for President of the United States, and she did it with a bang. She declared she was for Medicare for all, and then she clarified that by saying she did not mean it would be open for all who wanted to join, but she would eliminate the private health insurance system and force every American into a one-size-fits-all medical care system run by the government with a vast government bureaucracy making all the decisions, and you, the patient, having no recourse. And you will pay at least double the amount that you're paying in taxes right now. Even England did not go this far. Even though their socialized medicine system consumes 1/6 of their economy and is inferior to our system in virtually every way, at least there you can still purchase private insurance and see private doctors with your own money after you have paid your mandatory national health care tax. The socialists did try to outlaw private insurance, but they failed. In the U.S., 70% of people say they are either happy or very happy with their private health care coverage, and only about 10% of Americans do not have health insurance. So are we going to destroy a system that 70% of Americans are happy with and put millions of people who work for insurance companies out of work? Why? So that 90% of Americans can get catastrophically worse health care run by the government, and the 10% who are uninsured can get marginally better care. That is a bad deal, a fatally bad deal for Americans and for their children and their grandchildren. The sanctity of human life will be one of the first casualties of such a system. Let us pray Americans will say an emphatic no to this very, very dangerous idea. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. You probably followed some of the news about Jussie Smollett, who, by the way, was not a guy I'd ever heard of before this hate crime business became the rage. And by the way, that's more and more looking like another hate crime hoax. Remember, I've made this observation that actual hate crimes are so rare, they have to be invented. And I'm betting that that's what we're going to find out in this case, that there actually was no assault by these two guys wearing MAGA hats and saying this is MAGA country. I mean, you say that in Chicago, take your life in your hands doing that. And one of the problems with his story is that it keeps changing, number one. Like, for instance, the first time he talked to the police, he didn't say anything about the guys saying this is MAGA country. That's not the kind of thing you're going to forget, especially if you're black and you think that Trump is a white nationalist and supremacist and all that. It's only when it came out on TMZ that he had said that he had a second interview because the police went back to him and said, okay, it says here on this media outlet that you said they were wearing MAGA hats and said this is MAGA country. He says, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you guys that. Yeah. So he's kind of amending his story on the fly. And the police have looked at hours and hours and hours and hours of surveillance video, and they've got this guy on video, this Jussie Smollett guy. They have him on video for all but about 60 seconds of the journey from the subway to his hotel or apartment. All but about 60 seconds. They've got him. And they don't have any video in all of that of him actually together with two other guys. I mean, apparently there's one scene where the guys are across the street, he's on the other side of the street, and he walks off, and no sign of anybody following him. So his story is just starting to unravel at the edges. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of this, but I think we're going to find out it's going to be a hate crime hoax.
Yeah, what I've found out here just recently, too, is his manager is trying to back up the fact that that he overheard them say this is MAGA country because he was on the phone with this guy at the same time. Problem is that police have asked, what's his name, Smollett, for his phone, and he refuses to turn it over now.
Yeah,
that looks kind of suspicious.
Will not turn it over. Yeah, I mean, if you want to document that you've been the victim of a hate crime, and the phone is going to document kind of where you've been, it tracks your movements, and there may be video on there or whatever. I mean, you'd want to give the police that to kind of back up your story, and he won't. And then, let me see this story. He said he was assaulted and suffered a cracked rib, but the condo surveillance video, that's after he got back to the apartment, after he'd been to Subway, after he claims he'd been assaulted, he just looked absolutely normal, just walking past security to the elevator, didn't look to be injured or anything. So he's filmed in the lobby acting perfectly normal after the attack was supposed to have happened. So, we know by his own admission that he was a homosexual. I've talked with you before about one of the characteristics of the homosexual lifestyle is frequent amounts of anonymous and promiscuous sex. They have sex with people that they don't even know their names, and it's not infrequent. And I'm guessing that maybe what Jussie Smollett was out doing was looking to hook up with somebody. Maybe even the guy came to his hotel after the thing, and he had a gay date that went bad, and the guy beat him up. There's a highly elevated rate of domestic violence in homosexual liaisons, homosexual relationships. Because you look at his face in the hospital, he needed some medical attention for what happened to his face. So I think it's possible, and I'm guessing this is what we're going to find. Again, this is just a guess, so don't quote me on this, but I'm guessing we're going to find that this was a gay date gone bad. The injuries were inflicted on him by whichever homosexual guy he was hooking up with, and now he had a problem because he's got to go to the hospital to get his injuries looked after. But how is he going to explain that he got mugged by a homosexual on a gay date gone bad? That's going to look bad. That's going to be bad. So he didn't want that, so he conjures up this story about going to Subway for a midnight snack, and then he goes out so he can get on the surveillance cameras and be seen so everybody sees that he was down walking to Subway. Anyway, I don't know all about that, the details, but I'm guessing that his story is going to completely fall apart by the weekend.
There is one other thing that's kind of odd about this, too, is it took the police about 45 minutes to get there. And he still had the noose around his neck.
Yeah,
I mean, who's going to wear a noose around their neck after being attacked and sit there for 45 minutes?
Right. And then he wound up driving himself. He wound up driving himself to the hospital. Yeah. So he didn't ask them to get an ambulance for him. Didn't ask the cops to drive him anywhere. He drove himself to the hospital. Anyway, more questions than we have answers at this point. By the way, I want to let you know I did an interview this morning, and Jeff assisted me with that. Thank you very much, Jeff, because we had a little bit of a problem getting hooked up. But in an interview with the folks that are a part of James Dobson's Family Talk team, Dr. Dobson's on a writing sabbatical, but Dr. Tim Clinton, who's the head of the American Association of Christian Counselors, He did the interview with me. We recorded it this morning. It will air probably the first week in March, and it was about the book, the Boy to Man book. So
really good interview too.
You thought it was good?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to hear that because I never know. I don't know how I did in a situation like that until I hear from Debbie or from Jeff.
Yeah, the questions that he asked and the interaction between you, it really brought out a lot about this book that I think people are going to be interested about. So.
Okay, good. Well, I'll keep you apprised of when that air date is. It's going to be probably the first week in March. And don't forget, you can you don't have to wait for the interview to go order up a book. You can go to afastore.net, afastore.net, order one up today. All right, also just a quick programming note. I'll be a guest on Sandy Rios' program tomorrow morning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., so be sure and tune in for that. Sandy Rios and I spend the whole program talking about the book. All righty, let's see. Here's something I thought was just kind of silly. They're trying to make this this Howard Schultz guy look out of touch. They always want to do that with these rich people. Remember they tried to get George Bush on the grocery store scanner like he was completely out of touch. So they asked this Howard Schultz guy, well, how much does a box of Cheerios cost? And he had no idea. You know who else has no idea how much a box of Cheerios costs? I don't. Jeff just raised his hand. He doesn't. Rob?
I buy the groceries in my house.
Okay, so.
And I buy Cheerios, but I can't tell you how much I pay for them.
See, Rob can't even tell how much they cost, and he buys them.
I know. I say I need that. Got that.
Got it all you need. Yeah. Throw it in the box. You throw it in the cart. You just pay for it on the way out. Never bother to look at.
I think it's around $3.
Yeah. So anyway, the only cereal I'd be concerned about the cost would be Captain Crunch. Because it was affordable, I would get me some Captain Crunch.
Because it could be no more breakfast.
Right, yeah. All right, well, let's get to some sound bites in the interest of time. These committees are negotiating right now. They're meeting high level, the select committee, to come up with a border security plan. And Donald Trump has said, look, if you're not talking about funding the wall, you're just wasting your time. Don't bother. You don't bring me a plan for me to sign that's got money for the wall. You can just forget about it. I mean, it's a New York deal. Forget about it. So that's what Donald Trump is saying. So Nancy Pelosi has a weekly Thursday thing, briefing for the press. And here was a question that was asked of her this morning, and here was her answer. Listen carefully.
Even if it includes border wall money, though?
We're not having a negotiation over this right now. They're having a negotiation over it in there. There's not going to be any wall money in this nation.
There is not going to be any wall money in this legislation. So that's Nancy Pelosi. She's telling everybody, I mean, if they even try to put money for the wall in this thing, I'm going to yank it out of there. So that's one thing whatever happens on February 15, whatever bill is produced, it's not going to have money for the wall because the Queen of Mean herself has said so. It just is not going to happen. She's the Speaker of the House, so she has a lot of juice over there about what happens and what doesn't happen. Now here is Barbara Lee. She is a member of the Democratic conference, and so the question about wall funding in this bill comes up to her. Clip number 2.
Are there red lines around a wall from your caucus's perspective as you go into these negotiations?
We have talked, quite frankly, about the $5.7 billion that this president wants for a wall. That's unacceptable.
There you have it. That's unacceptable. Barbara Lee, member of the Democratic caucus, any money for the wall is unacceptable. We've talked about this. I believe Trump needs to get his ducks in a row. By the way, let's just play clip number 3. This is Sarah Huckabee Sanders talking about President Trump. Clip 3.
I think God calls all of us to fill different roles at different times, and I think that he wanted Donald Trump to become president, and that's why he's there. And I think he has done a tremendous job in supporting a lot of the things that people of faith really care about.
All right, so Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, look, she believes that God wanted Donald Trump to be president, and I think that is very, very likely true when you think of the alternative. You know, you think what's happening in Virginia. By the way, who are the people that are making abortion a states' rights issue? It's the Democrats. You know, Virginia's now got unlimited abortion, no restrictions. Rhode Island's doing the same thing. Vermont's doing the same thing. New York is leading the pack. New Mexico is running behind of them. So they're all just ignoring whatever federal law is and saying, we're going to make our own laws. Abortion is an issue for the states, so we're going to make our own laws. That's what they are doing. Now, here is Governor Northam from Virginia, and he was explaining this bill. We played the soundbite yesterday of the delegate who's sponsoring the bill. Remember, she admitted under questioning that the bill would permit a doctor to perform abortion while the mother is in the process of delivering the baby. When the process of delivery has already begun, the woman can request an abortion under her bill, and the doctor will have to kill the baby. So here's Governor Northam yesterday morning on a talk show in Virginia.
So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mothers.
A discussion would ensue. Now listen very carefully to what he said. This is just what is so barbaric. You know, and you saw how calm he was, just talking as if we were chit-chatting about tickets to a Cubs game or something. And he's talking about what would happen if a baby is born alive, who came in to, if the mother came in to have an abortion and her baby is born alive. Well, number one, he says, we would resuscitate that baby. We would deliver the baby, first of all. We would make it comfortable. Then we would resuscitate it. We would make sure the baby was alive, restore it to full life, as long as that's what the mother and the doctor wanted. So in other words, if the baby is delivered and it's made comfortable and the mom doesn't want it to live, then the implication is from Governor Northam, we just leave it there to die. We toss it in the corner and let the baby expire. And then he says, if the baby's resuscitated, then a conversation would ensue. Conversation about what? Well, obviously about what to do with this living, born baby. I mean, that's an American citizen now. When that baby's outside of the womb, it's an American citizen. So now you clearly are not talking about the body of the mother. You're talking about a body that's completely separated from her body. It's the body of her baby. And so apparently Governor Northam thinks the right thing to do at that point would have to be a discussion about whether we want to kill this baby or whether we want to let it live. So you can understand the outcry that has come up against this thing, and rightly so. Let's drop down to Bret Hume, clip number 6. I want to squeeze this in before we go to the break. By the way, my guest, Bert Harper, will be on in the last segment to talk about what we can do for pastors to minister to them. Anyway, Bret Hume was talking about the accusations. No, we got to do the Brokaw thing first. Clip number 8. Here is Tom Brokaw and what he said that got him in big trouble.
I also happen to believe that the Hispanics should work harder at assimilation. That's one of the things I've been saying for a long time. You know, that they ought not to be just codified in their communities, but make sure that all of their kids are learning to speak English and that they feel comfortable in the communities. And that's going to take outreach on both sides, frankly.
Okay, so he says we need to see more effort at assimilation on the part of Hispanic immigrants, and that would be true generally across the board. And number one, learn how to speak English. I mean, that would be the number one thing you need to do in order to assimilate into American culture, is learn to speak the language of the land and the language of the people. And he says that'll require outreach on both sides. You know, we're going to want to provide language training for them, and they're going to want to accept it, and they're going to want to pursue it. But that's what they don't want to do. That's why there was just this outcry against Tom Brokaw for being a racist. Now, Bret Hume responds to this accusation. We'll have to pull out of this early, Rob. Let's start it now. Pull out of it. Bret Hume talking about this charge of racism.
Mostly what I saw, Bret, was reaction to what he said about assimilation. And he was widely accused on Twitter of being a racist. Now, I know Tom, I've known him for a long time. Tom Brokaw is no racist. And what he said, if you think about it, is immigrant friendly. That is to say, he wants to see the immigrants who come here to this country become a part of our country, to assimilate into it, to learn the predominant language in America. That's not a negative wish, and it is not racist. Racism implies, in all definitions, the belief in the superiority of one race over another. It doesn't have to do with learning language, and it doesn't have to do really with anything that he said. He was unfairly accused, but it's an example, Brett, of the way the word racist has been flung around with such abandon. You know, there's an...
Okay, so there's Tom Brokaw. Racism has been weaponized. He's right.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
A database of citizens with birth defects is inherently repugnant, but all 50 states have one. Recall how Adolf Hitler targeted children and adults with birth defects. Eugenics started in the United States with 27 states sterilizing citizens, but it became deadly in Germany. Doctors had to register each case of genetic disorder with the courts or face punishment. The reports were filed in specially created databanks, reports the Holocaust Teacher Resource Center. Health officials were sent into the homes of every person reported to have a genetic disease. Many children and adults with disabilities were murdered. State birth defect databases empower eugenic tendencies.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly e-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hey, Target. You thought we were done? Did you think we would give up? Well, of course not. We still stand strong with our belief that men do not belong in the women's restrooms or changing areas. It's absurd. We should not have to walk in your restrooms with the fear of someone of the opposite sex walking in on us. Together, we will stop this open door policy. Help us by signing the pledge to boycott Target at afa.net.
Today's culture is opting for entertainment rather than biblical enlightenment. For those who resist that trend, Friends of Israel shows listeners why loving the Jewish people and supporting Israel is important to the Christian faith. Friends of Israel shares biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah and promotes solidarity with the Jewish people.
This is Chris Katolka of the Friends of Israel Today radio program, heard each weekend on this station, and here's what's happening in Israel.
Friends of Israel, Saturday afternoon at 2, here on American Family Radio.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time. So that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to the last segment of Focal Point, the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Came across this story before I introduce my next guest about this roller coaster in Taiwan. It's called Gravity Max. Never seen this before, but it's a roller coaster that you come to a dead stop and the roller coaster tips 90 degrees, so you're facing straight down. And then it latches onto another track. You change tracks. And then the ride releases you and you go zooming off. Well, the thing got stuck. The mechanism wouldn't connect the car to the track it was supposed to ride on. So these people were left hanging there upside down, well, face down really, over a 15-story drop. And they finally got them all rescued from that. But speaking of feeling like you're face down over a 15-story drop, notice the graceful broadcast segue here. Being a pastor can feel like that sometimes. You think you're looking down in the abyss. I've been there, pastored for 25 years. My next guest pastored even longer than I did because I was a wuss. I wimped out after 25 years. And my next guest, Bert Harper, outlasted me by a number of years. But Bert Harper, he is, I'm going to have you tell your title, Bert, because I can never remember the whole thing.
It is Director of Family, Marriage, and Pastoral Ministries.
Okay, so Bert's got the longest title of anybody that works in the AFR constellation. And somebody told me that's in lieu of giving you a raise in pay. They just add more words to your title.
The shorter the title, the more the money.
Yeah.
You know, president.
Yeah.
You know, pastor.
Yeah. You know, then you get a regional vice president for human resources in engineering and production. You know, that guy's at the bottom of the totem pole. All right. Well, Bert, one of the things I love about what you do in your ministry is what's called a Fishbowl retreat, and some of our listeners will be familiar with it. We talk about it each time you do one of these. You've got another one of these coming up, but before we talk about the specific details about the one that's coming up, this is a retreat for pastors and their wives. Why do you call it a Fishbowl retreat?
Every pastor out there is holding their hand up and say, Brian, I know. The best way to tell this, if you go to a store like Walmart and you get your cart and you push it through and you meet a member of your church, they're going to check out, see what you bought. They're going to see what's in there. And then they're going to see which car you go to in the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
It's just your own display. That's the word that if you watch a fish in a fishbowl, they're on display. And it comes with the territory. It says we're to be examples to the flock. So they're watching us to see what kind of example we are, Brian. But every once in a while, it just kind of gets tough, especially on wives who married their husbands when they were not pastors, and then later on that man gets called to be a pastor and his wife comes along. And hopefully she was called. Hopefully she feels equipped to do and aid him in that. But it can be pretty tough, especially, I would say on my wife. Jan, my wife's the one that came up with the idea. Mm-hmm. She came from a home where her father had left she and her mom and two siblings, and she said, when I married you, I knew how to be a mom. I hadn't observed being a wife close up, much less a pastor's wife.
Right.
And there's a learning curve there. And so at Fishbowl, we try to just get to meet one another, build fellowship, build relationships, and try to give them a little bit of encouragement along the way. It's a retreat, not a conference.
Yeah.
You know, a conference is bam, bam, bam. Retreat has got some time in there to relax and talk.
Just a little more relaxed.
Yes.
Kind of a slower, more relaxed pace. Yes. And the purpose is not so much to cram a bunch of teaching into people that come. It is to give just kind of pump some air into them.
That's
because
it, brother.
Ministry can be very deflating. It can be very draining. And so here's an opportunity for pastors and their wives to slip away for just a few days and just kind of get re-energized. So you've got one coming up.
I do. Let me tell you how we've come up with two this year.
Hey, wait.
Yeah.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Before we get into the specifics about this one, you've done a number of these Fishbowl retreats now, and you've been encouraged this year to do two in this year because the need is so great. So tell me, what are you hearing when you go to these Fishbowl retreats? What have you been hearing from these guys about what they're dealing with? And what are you hearing back from couples that have gone to a Fishbowl retreat?
When we go there, the first thing that we do is introduce everyone. We keep it small so that we can do that, Brian. You know, they'll be small enough so people can get to know one another. And here's what I hear. We did not know that we were as tired. We did not know that we were not the only ones that were feeling burned out. We did not know we were the only ones that were being challenged to be this. And the camaraderie, the relationships that are built, and they go away saying, I've heard it again, we were shocked at how refreshed we feel in 3 days and 2 nights. We're ready to go back. And we're going back with some encouragement. We're going back with, hopefully, Jan and I give them some things that will help them, through our experiences. And also they go back with new relationships. And because of modern day communication, man, you can have a friend, you be in Mississippi and have a friend that lives all the way in Minnesota. And you stay close because of modern day communication. So you go back with, I'd say this, you go back with more friends than you came with.
And I guess a number of the pastors that you'll have come, Bert, are solo pastors. They're not part of a big, giant team of pastors.
Most of the time, Ray Pritchard, who is on our board and is on Today's Issues with Tim, he was one of our Bible teachers last year, and he said there's nothing like this that he's ever heard of or been to in all of his life of ministry. That's what he said. And he said we need to do more of them. That's why we're doing 2. And then he came away in saying, concerning what you just said, that these pastors and their wives, when they're coming, they need this because most of them are coming from smaller churches. And now, not all of them. We have some that's, they've got 1,000 attendees, Very few mega church pastors come, but we have large church pastors come, and many of them are small. Some of them are even bivocational. And so they come from all over. We've had them from Canada, all the way from Arizona. We had them out in Maryland, Florida, everything in the Southeast. But we've had them from many, many places and locations, and they get to know one another, and it's a blessing.
Well, I'm guessing we've got a number of pastors. I know many pastors listen to this program, listen to Bert's program, Exploring the Word. It comes on at 3, just in about an hour and 10 minutes from now. But I don't think a lot of people understand the demand that are made on a solo pastor in a small church. And I remember some big, high-powered corporate executive who was a Christian and worked in Christian ministry and helped. He says, he thought that was the toughest job in America. It was tougher than any corporate job in America, was being a pastor, a solo pastor of a small church. So it can be very draining. So I'm sure I'm got some pastors listening to me right now saying, man, that is me. I could use a chance to come up for some air. I could use a chance to be in a place where other people can identify with what I'm feeling. That's I'm sure part of the problem.
That's what it is.
You think you're in this all by yourself. Yeah. Nobody really feels like I'm feeling. You feel kind of alone. So the opportunity to be with people that you know can identify with you can be a big, big help.
One of the neatest things I heard from someone, and they said this way, it's not denominational. Said when you go to denominational, even pastors and wives, everybody knows from that denomination your size church, what it is. In this one, nobody knows. And there's no doctors, no reverends, no brothers there. It's Bert, Jan, Brian, Debbie, Jeff, Ann, Robert, Susan. I mean, it's, we
First
give no titles, no titles. They'll come up to me and they'll say, Brother Harper, or not, I don't answer. I told him I answer to Bert while I'm here. And because, honestly, we need that from time to time, Brian, where we're not called on for the position or title. God knows us who we are. I was out in Utah one time filling up with gas in Salina, Utah. It's on the loneliest road in America, and I was putting gasoline in my car ready to go, and somebody said, "Hello, Brother Harper." I turned around. The way I tell it in the pulpit, I knew that wasn't God. That's not what he calls me. And it was some guys here from Lee County that I'd known and you, and it was amazing to see that. But up at Fishbowl, it's just first names only.
Yeah. By the way, one of the things I've had to learn being a relative newbie to the South, you have to learn how to pronounce certain words.
I'm an expert.
I've had to learn how to say pulpit.
Yeah.
In the West it's pulpit.
Yeah.
But here it's the pulpit. So anyway.
Hey, my wife, you think I'm Southern now. You should have seen me before Jan got a hold of me, Brian. I tell folks Goober and Gomer had nothing on Bert,
And I also know, get back to what we're talking about here, I also know I'm talking to members of the board of deacons in the church where you go. Some of you know your pastor fairly well. You may have some idea of kind of the struggles and the strain that he's under. This would be an opportunity for your little church to do something for him. Or if your church is a bigger church, I mean, pastors of larger churches, they've got a staff around them, but the pressure is very intense because they feel the responsibility to keep this bigger organization on the rails, keep it moving, keep it growing. So a lot of stress associated with that. So I want to challenge you, if you're an elder in your church, if you are on the board of deacons, and I want to challenge you right now to think about it as Bert and I are talking about it. Think about sending your pastor to this thing, just as kind of a sign of affection and support from the congregation. So put that right in the front of your mind and see if you can do something about that. Bert, let's give us the details about when this next one's coming up and how people can get registered for it, where they can get more information about it.
It is April the 9th, 10th, and 11th. It's in Tyler, Texas, beautiful Tyler, Texas. There's a great running back from Tyler, Texas, known as the Tyler Rose. Can't even remember his name right now. Isn't that bad? Come on this and use that example. Look it up, Rob. Bert, I'm telling you.
Bert,
that's
Bert,
this is not Trivia Friday. This is not Trivia Friday, is it?
Tyler Rose.
The Tyler Rose.
Wasn't Bo Jackson.
But it's at the Pine Cove Camp at the Bluffs. It's a large camp, but the Bluffs is the one that has rooms and restrooms, bathrooms. Couples stay together. And again, Dr. Jeff Shreve, who is on AFR, and he does the program from his heart. He's pastor of First Baptist Church, Texarkana, Texas. He's going to be our guest speaker, and Jan and I will be sharing. And the cost is $400 per couple. That's for lodging, meals, materials, everything that you need there. And the number that you call, and I'll say it slowly. I learned that from Sherathon. Say it slowly, Bert. They'd say 1-800-326-4543. That's 1-800-326-4543, extension 300, or call for Barbara. But an easier way is to go online at repairingthefoundations.net. Repairingthefoundations.net. That's all lowercase, and it's singular, foundations. If you don't put the S on there, you'll learn how to prop up your house. Yeah.
So repairing the foundations.
Plural.
Plural. It's plural, not singular.
Yeah, that's right.
Foundations.net.
And it'll give you all that info. You can even register online, or you can call Barbara. Again, let me give that 1-800-326-4543.
Okay, terrific. Repairing the foundations. And
I have the name for you. One running back we all know very well. Yeah. Earl Campbell.
I can't believe I couldn't think of that.
I was trying to retrieve that name. That's the guy that I was thinking of.
Exactly.
The Tyler Rose, man. That's where he's from.
Played for the Houston Oilers, and just an incrable running back.
Yeah.
Man, that guy had
he was a beast.
That guy had the biggest thighs of anybody I
He was a beast.
I knew it wasn't Herschel Walker, but he was in that category. There's 3 or 4 of them in that category.
Well, he had size and speed. Man, he get moving. It was just almost impossible to slow that guy down.
I love it. Listen, with us looking at the Super Bowl coming up, I can't help but think that what you want to do is think about all the pressure it's on those coaches to try to get them ready, the pressure on pastors to get that sermon and have it right. Although, financially it's not the same, but I want to tell you the pressure of speaking the Word of God Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, it's quite a load for you, pastor. You need to pray for them in doing so.
All right, thank you very much, Bert Harper, Repairing the Foundations. You can get more information by going to repairingthefoundations.net. All right, no, we don't really have another couple of minutes left, do we? I was hoping to squeeze in that I don't have time for it. I got a Roger Stone. Let me just read the transcript from this. This is Roger Stone talking about his arrest. And listen to this. He said, I'm 66 years old. I don't own a firearm. I shared a little bit of this yesterday. I have no prior criminal record. My passport has expired, so he's not a flight risk to leave the country. Couldn't if he wanted to. The special counsel's office is well aware of the fact that I'm represented, so I've got an attorney who's going to walk me to the deal. The idea that a 29-member SWAT team in full tactical gear with assault weapons, 17 vehicles in my front yard, a helicopter overhead, etc. That's what they did when they came to arrest him, bang on the door of his house, 4 o'clock in the morning. All right, that's it for today. Remember, we're fighting a little bit of war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association. We're here to inform,